Hello, everyone. Today we are reading chapter 23 of the Old Testament book of Joshua. This chapter is Joshua's farewell address. The chapter begins by saying that many years have passed. Israel is in a time of relative peace, and Joshua is very old. He calls together the leaders of the people of Israel, the judges, the elders, the officers, and the like, so that he can share with them some final thoughts. As with our previous studies of Joshua, there are some statements that are in this chapter that you might find troubling, and I can't help to sort all that out, but I'm gonna try my best. And we're gonna start with verses 6 through 8. Joshua is speaking, and this is what he says. Be very strong and be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, without turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them, but you are to hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. There are a couple of points worth mentioning here. The first bit about obeying the law jumps out at me. He says that we should be wary of drifting either to the right or to the left. Kind of feel like that speaks directly to us right now. Amongst the followers of Jesus Christ, there are those that are perceived as legalistic, and then there are those that are perceived as all over the top, full of grace. The truth is, we need to hold a balance. Our good friend Tom Egham once said, mercy without truth is meaningless, and truth without mercy is just plain mean. The only way for us to preserve this balance is to carefully and regularly reflect on God's teachings in Scripture. That means we need to be reading our Bibles and wrestling with what God is trying to tell us. The second thing I notice in this section is that there's this discussion about false gods of the other nations. Joshua warns that we must not give any credence to these gods. Rather, we need to hold fast to the one true God who has consistently kept his promises to us. The next passage I want to point out is verses 12 and 13. And this is what Joshua says there. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. This passage might give you some trouble. In the 21st century, you might read this as some sort of cultural exceptionalism that borderlines on racism. It seems as though Joshua is saying that if an Israelite will lose God's protection if they marry outside of the tribe. The thing is, Joshua is not writing in the 21st century. He's writing in the 12th century BC. And at the time, there is no distinction between race, nation, and religion. So to marry into another nation inevitably involves adopting the elements of their religion. So this prohibition against intermarriage is not about race, rather it's about faith. I actually see this as an extremely relevant passage to us today. When we compromise and allow ourselves to embrace elements of the world, we eventually realize that it degrades our faith. As an example, the idea of intimacy outside of marriage has long been understood to be wrong. Intimacy is held as a sacred thing that is reserved for marriage. And even as many have not lived up to that expectation, it was understood that it was the expectation. But the world, as it has portrayed it in movies and on TV, has universally rejected that standard. And as a result, most Americans, including those who believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, not only accept premarital sex as okay, but actually think it should happen. And here comes the snare and trap that Joshua warns. We see right now in society that the family structure is breaking down. Sexually transmitted diseases are on the rise and sometimes even considered acceptable. And the spiritual and mental health of Americans is worse than it's ever been. So how do we fix this? I think Joshua has already given us advice on that. Back at verse 6, be very strong and be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses without turning aside to the right or to the left. We don't need to go to battle with the world. We need to correct ourselves by repenting when we realize we're not living as God has called us to. We need to ground ourselves in scriptures that will guide us in navigating this narrow path that we're talking about. And we need to be honest with ourselves and with others when we realize we need to change. As they say, be the change you want the world to see. Or maybe better yet, as the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 12, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Have a great day, everyone. If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.